Next game, we're going to build on what we've done before. So we're going to take the ability to combine storyboards with SwiftUI views, and we're going to take the SwiftUI view that we've already created and do some interesting things with them all. So what I'm going to do is take our tip calculator, which was just calculating restaurant tips, and we're going to build it out so you can calculate taxi tips, restaurant tips, bartender tips, bellhop tips, all that kind of stuff. And we're going to have the different choices that you have be controlled inside of a storyboard, and that's going to impact the outcome of the SwiftUI views that will be the actual tip calculators themselves. So it should be pretty slick when we're all done. Let's check it out. So let's go ahead and make a new project. Single app view again. Make this smaller so you can see it. And keep, again, make sure user interface is set to storyboard. So the first thing I'm going to do is wire it up just like I had done before with our previous integrating SwiftUI with storyboard stuff. And so I'm going to give myself a little bit of room on my little teeny window here. The first thing I'm going to do is take my view controller and embed it inside of a navigation controller. The next thing I'm going to do is add a hosting view controller that will hold my SwiftUI. And just because it's cool, I'm going to go ahead and give this one a name, this navigation bar up here. So this will be called like tip calculator. And what I'm going to do is on this page here, have buttons to go to restaurants, taxis, bartender, bellhop. And this could be an infinite number of things. And what's cool about this is I could design this however I wanted. I could have big background images that show images of taxis and images of restaurants and images of bartenders and images of bellhops and all that kind of stuff. I think this is super useful. I don't know about you, but it took me a long time to realize how much I was supposed to tip all these different people and always felt super awkward and weird. And so if we just had it built in, it'd be cool. The convenient part is that out of the four that we're going to build, taxis, restaurants, and bartenders, they all work, those three are all work the same, where it's all based on percentages of the total bill. And then bellhop is the unique one that is based on the number of bags that the person is carrying. So we'll get to that in a second, but for now, let's just go ahead and set this up by adding some buttons. So zoom in, and this will be the button that goes to taxi. And again, I could design this just however I wanted using normal storyboard stuff. Restaurants, bartender, man, I'm having some serious typing problems today. And bellhop. Restaurant. Okay. And let's style this to look a little bit nicer. Still looks janky, but you get the idea. All right, so now what I'm going to do is connect these two just like we've done before, only here's what's super cool. I only need one hosting controller. The hosting view controller just hosts SwiftUI views, and I can put different SwiftUI views into that based on the segue. So it makes it really convenient and makes the storyboard a little bit cleaner. So what I'm going to do is say this taxi goes to a SwiftUI hosting container. So does restaurant. Bartender is also going to go to one. And bellhop is going to go to one. Sweet. All right, now let's go to our files. And I'm going to make SwiftUI files. Now, like I said, restaurants, taxis, and bartenders, all I'm going to have be based on total percentage of the bill. And bellhop is the only one that's unique that's based on the total number of bags. So what I can do is make one SwiftUI for restaurants, taxis, and bartenders, and just use the simple passing variable names back and forth, or variable values back and forth, so that it looks like to the user these are unique things, but really it's all one SwiftUI file. And then I'll have a brand new SwiftUI file for my bellhop. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and create a new file, SwiftUI view. Only this one I'm going to give it a name. It's like restaurant, taxi, bartender, SwiftUI view. Seems like kind of a game, rock, paper, scissors, to restaurant, taxi, bartender. All right, we've created that. Sweet. And make it so that we can see that it's working. Instead of saying hello world, I'm going to say hello restaurant. We'll get to what the other stuff is in a second. And now I'm going to go ahead and make a new file that's just for my bellhop. And give it some unique text so I can tell that I'm in a new thing. And then I'm going to go back to my storyboard and wire up these segues. Now, I made a mistake while I was working on this to set it up for you guys. And I realized that the mistake I made might be something you all run into. So I want to make sure that you see it. You want to make sure that you don't control drag the buttons into your code. Control drag the segues into your code. All right, so I'm looking at taxi right now, so I'm going to control drag taxi over. And we'll call this show taxi. Connect. And then we're going to control drag restaurant. So get the next one and make sure it's highlighting right. Yep, that's restaurant. Control drag that over. Show restaurant. Next, bartender. Make sure it's right. Yep. Control drag bartender. Next, bellhop. So make sure you select the segue, not the button itself. Okay, and so now this gray array I need to replace with the root view name of each SwiftUI element. So if I'm going to go back to my SwiftUI just to make sure I got it right, these three are all called this. Let me get this out of the way so we can see it better. These three are all called this. So I'm going to copy that. And so taxi, instead of saying ... needs to say this with parentheses saying load or run the restaurant, taxi, bartender, SwiftUI view. Same thing here. Bartender, same thing. Bellhop's going to be unique. So we'll get to the bellhop in a second. And I see these stop signs. Don't worry, we'll get to that. Bellhop is named this. Copy. Paste. All right, so let's take a look at these exclamation points. What are we doing wrong? Let's look at it. They're saying use of unresolved identifier UI hosting controller. Okay, what's happening is UI hosting controller isn't something that the code knows what that means. And why is that? Well, if I scroll up to the top, I've only imported UIKit. I also need to import all the powers of SwiftUI as well. And so now all of SwiftUI is also available inside of this page, and those should go away. Now we can test it. And so I have taxi, restaurant, bartender, bellhop. If I hit taxi, it should say restaurant. Good. Restaurant should say restaurant. Bartender, bellhop. Great. So these three are all linked to the same SwiftUI file. This one is the unique special one. Now what's cool is that I've already done the work for these. This restaurant calculator is the same thing. It's just total bill, number of people, percentage of the tip. And so what I'm going to do is, rather than redo all that work, I'm just going to go up here into my Xcode and load up that recent file that we'd worked on. So here's the in-class demo of the SwiftUI calculator with this one, SwiftUI calculator. And you'll recall this bad boy. Let me make this a little bit smaller so y'all can see it. I'm going to turn off the preview so we have room. And so this is this guy. You remember this. And so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to steal it. So I'm going to say grab every single thing inside this content view. The states, the bounded states, what binds the buttons to each other, total per person, calculation, all of this. I'm going to grab it all, except for this preview stuff. Make sure I got it all. Yep. Copy it to my clipboard. I don't need this file anymore, so I'm going to close it. And I'm going to do that. Just go into my restaurant, taxi, bartender stuff and say, you know what? Let me get some more room by, again, turning off the canvas that shows me the preview. I'm wiping out all this and replacing it with this. And so now all that sweet, sweet code that I have should automatically work. And so I'm going to run it. And now taxi loads up this. Restaurant loads up this. Bartender loads up this. Now I've got a couple problems, so let's take a look at one of them. If I go into one of these things, it doesn't say anything here to tell me that I'm inside of a taxi. So I'm going to fix that. Same thing here, it doesn't tell me anything about a restaurant. Watch this also. So if you remember, we had taken this thing and wrapped it inside of a navigation. That's right here. Because we put it inside of a navigation view, if I do this, it now puts navigation within navigation. So my tip bar goes all the way back to here. But then this button here goes back to here. Starts to get massively confusing to the user. And so what we're going to do is rip out that navigation view. And what's cool is that because the storyboard has a navigation view controller on it, this button will work properly because it's going to use that root navigation bar controller. So to start with, we're just going to get rid of this and scroll down and get rid of the extra curly bracket that we don't need anymore. Run it, make sure it works. Remember, I like to do one thing, test it. Do one thing, test it. Sweet, so now that looks a little bit prettier. If I go into here, this makes it easier. Awesome. All right, another thing that I think that we missed was kind of a whiff before is that we didn't default to a good tip amount. We defaulted to 0%. So I'm going to default to 20%. And if you remember, that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the fourth element in the segmented controller. And so what I'm going to do here is when I define the default state of the segmented controller, instead of defaulting to the 0th spot, I'm going to default to the 4th spot. Cool. 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 All right, now let's make it so that these things actually look nice. I kind of understand what I'm doing. And so instead of just saying bill, I'm going to put the type of bill right here. So let's go ahead and do that. And how that's going to work is I'm going to have a variable called type, and it's a string. And it's going to say type is, well, type is kind of reserved. Seems like should be a reserved word inside of Swift. So let's just make it say like bill type. And so down here in the bill, I'm not just going to say bill. I'm going to first say bill type, and then add in that string. And I'm going to get an error here and say, hey, you're supposed to have a bill type down here. Oh yeah, so let's give that a bill type of default. I'm going to use the word default here so I can keep track of if I'm looking at something in the canvas, it will display it as default. Or if it's being called from my storyboards, which we got that same error message we had before from when we did this sort of thing in the last project. So let's go ahead and fix that. So bill type needs to be added to every single one of these embedded hosting view controllers. And so you can see I got 3 stop signs because I'm missing each one. So let's go ahead and fix. And so this one is taxi. So the type, bill type is a taxi. This one, we'll hit fix, is a restaurant. And this one is a bartender. Let's hit go. So now when I hit taxi, it will say taxi bill. When I hit restaurant, it will say restaurant bill. And when I say bartender, it will say bartender bill. Now, I don't know exactly what the official tipping standards are, but I like to tip bartenders 10 to 15 to 20%, depending on how fancy pants they are. But servers, I like to tip at least 20%. So I'm going to use that kind of arty logic, which may be different for you, to change how this is working. So instead of just saying bill type is getting passed in, I'm also going to pass in default percentage. So let's set this up to receive default percentage. It's going to be an int. And I'm going to put this default percentage above the binding because I'm going to use the binding to control tip percentage. And then down here, this says, hey, I need to also know what default percentage is. So add it. Default percentage is going to be this is my default again. So this is inside of the little canvas preview. We'll say it's 0 so we can make it really clear that which one we're on. But then inside of here, my view controller, I'm going to get the same error messages in a second. Oh, I got something else it doesn't like. What doesn't it like? Okay. We'll scrap this feature and use it in a different way. So instead of saying an int, I'll give my user a little hint right here inside of tip amount. We're not going to have a default change these sliders. That's going to be a little more complicated for you guys. So instead we'll do it right here. So tip amount and say something like recommended is, and then we'll drop in whatever we passed. Hold on, I know. We'll fix you. So recommended is, what was it, default percentage. And we need to turn it into a string. Sorry, this is so hard to read when it's really small. Let me see if I can get a little bit bigger. So, we need to say tip percentage up here because it doesn't like this. It is 4. Great. Okay. So let's preview this inside of my little canvas. Make sure it's working. So this should say default percentage is 0. Oh, it still doesn't like those other problems. Okay, let's go fix those. So taxi, restaurant, and bartender all need their default. So we'll say that taxis will default to, I don't know, 15%. We'll say that restaurants, I want to encourage the users to tip at 20%. And bartenders will default to 15%. Whoops. 15%. All right, let's run it. So taxis, it says taxi bill, and it gives you a little hint of what it's supposed to be. Oh, I got some typos in there. We'll fix that in a second. Restaurant, same typos, but it's working. And bartender, same typos, but it's working. So let's go ahead and fix the part that I made a mistake on. Which is right here. And so I'm just smashing together the string, tip amount recommended is blah, 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 plus whatever I had said the default percentage is, plus a percentage sign, end of the parentheses, and then a colon. We'll make the default selection stuff work in a second, but for now, let's just get this going. Taxi, taxi recommended. Restaurant, restaurant recommended. Bartender, bartender recommended. Great. And by the way, it all still works from our earlier code. So if I had a giant bartender bill for 10 people and I wanted to do the recommended of 15, each person would cost $57.50. Great. We're working. All right, now let's build out the bellhop. So bellhop just says bellhop. Let's go ahead and do a little bit more complicated. So we're going to do the same kind of thing as we did before, where we're going to have a segmented controller, or not a segmented controller, rather. We're going to have one of these pickers that tells you that you can pick number of people. Only instead of number of people, we're going to just simply have it say number of bags. We need to have something that's bound, so it's tagged, it's bound to number of bags. So that's a state variable, so we're going to do the same kind of thing that we've done up here, only we said number of people, we're going to change that to number of bags. It doesn't like something. Fix that in a bit. Okay. Let's, I don't know. Oh, I need to put this inside of a VStack. And just so I don't get that same problem, I'm going to run my canvas. I don't really like doing it this way with you guys because I don't have a lot of room, but we won't get those annoying error messages because I'll notice when I'm doing wrong. Okay, great. We have number of bags. Okay, cool. I don't like how this is displaying, so I'm going to just go ahead and steal how I did it in the last one and said, okay, how did I get number of people to look so nice? I don't want that either. Okay. Oh, it was wrapped inside of a form and then inside of a section. Okay, I can fix that. Let's see how that looks. Great. Bellhop, number of bags. Choose number of bags. Cool. It's starting to come together. I want this left justified and all that kind of stuff, so I'm just going to wrap these inside of a section. I'm indenting with command square bracket, by the way, to kind of change how indentation works. I'm not sure if I ever mentioned that to you guys. Okay, well, I'll fix that in a second. All right, cool. That's starting to come together. I'm pretty happy with that. Whoops, that's what's wrong. This is in the wrong place. Still doesn't like it. I'll figure that out later. All right, so sweet. I have bellhop. I have number of bags, and then I need to have down here the total amount the bill is going to be, or what the tip should be. And so I'm going to do the same thing I've done before, which is just steal from myself. So I'm going to scroll down here in my restaurant calculator and said the total bill is just like this. And then this should be, instead of check amount, I'll call this bill amount. And I'll have to create bill amount out of a variable, which we'll do like we did the bill amount last time. So we call that check amount here. So it's right there. It's a string that gets generated. Just trying to remember how I did all that stuff. And so it's based on what they typed in. I don't want to have it be based on what they typed in. I want it to be auto-generated. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same kind of thing I've done here, where I use a variable that is calculated like a function. And that's going to be called bill amount. So I need to rename it. And bill amount's going to be very, very simple. It's not going to do all this kind of complicated stuff. It's just going to take number of bags times 1 plus 1, because how bags work is that if they take one bag, you should pay them $2, and then each additional bag after that, you give them additional $1. So I'm just going to say return number of bags times or plus 1. So if they've given us 1 bag, I should pay them $2. If they've given us 2 bags, I should pay them $3, etc. And it doesn't like the fact that number of bags is not a double, so I'm going to convert number of bags into a double and add 1.0 so that it knows that 1 is a double. And now everything should work. Oh, okay, let's do it this way. I was wrong. Okay. And this doesn't like the fact this is a double, so I need to convert it into a string. And kablamo, my bellhop should work. So taxi, restaurant, bartender all works like the stuff that we've done before, only now bellhop, I can say I have 1 bag and it says I owe them $2. If I have 2 bags, I owe them $3. If I have 10 bags, I owe them $11. Awesome. So my tip calculator has now been enhanced and integrated with Storyboards.